everyone, welcome back to the Unwellness community. Us to tell our real stories and heal. So, I had the fortune, I'm so grateful that I got to be a part of the Bikram community, but I used to be a Bikram Yoga teacher for, I would say, about 3.5 years. And I first started out as a 26 and 2 teacher. So, to break that down, first let me break down Bikram. Bikram Yoga is 26 postures with 2 breathing exercises. It was designed, like he says, according to what he says, by Bikram Choudhury. So Bikram Choudhury, I want to tell you about him. He's a very interesting guy. He's quite polarizing. There have been allegations that he has committed some things about him. So committed some things like the R word. I can't say it on YouTube if you're listening, if you're watching on YouTube, but he's committed some things against women, allegedly, and that is why he's been basically forced to live in another country other than the USA. He used to live in Beverly Hills. So Bikram was born on the 8th of February 1944 in India, Calcutta, it says over here, and I'm looking at Wikipedia. Obviously, I've heard his story has changed a few times, so I wouldn't really focus on that. I mean, he is an Aquarius like me, and we tend to be quite weird people in our own right. And sometimes the thing about Aquarius, we tend to be very like, if we don't humble ourselves, we can have a God complex and not really welcome in criticism. So from what I've read about him, from what I've watched about him, and I'm going to include a few clips about him that just shows his character. He's a very verbose, very in your face, very I know it all, very like eccentric. That's the word, eccentric, and just an odd guy. Very, when he walks into a room, you'll notice him, not necessarily because of what he looks like, but because of how he acts. So I never met Bikram. I learned the sequence through the yoga studio that I used to go to that was developed and cultured by his protege called Bikram. I speak about it in last week's episode. So it says here, the business, I'm getting this straight from Wikipedia. I know Wikipedia is not the best source, but I feel like it's the most streamlined at the moment. So I do encourage you to do your own research on Bikram. There's been a few documentaries, and actually I'm going to get into one of them later on, because I met the producer / director creator of the Netflix documentary, and I want to tell you my account about her. So it says in 2009 he began a series of copyright claims to protect the series. Okay, so initially, let me go back a little bit. So it says Bikram Choudhury, born 1944. Just from private knowledge, I know that he's born on the 8th of February, allegedly, what he says in interviews and stuff, because I've watched a lot of his interviews just for when I was a teacher, so that I could get background knowledge on the practice. Is an Indian born American yoga guru and the founder of Bikram Yoga, a form of hot yoga consisting of fixed series of 26 postures practiced in a hot environment of 40 degrees Celsius, 104 Fahrenheit. The business became a success in the United States and then across the Western world with a variety of celebrity pupils. His former wife, Rajeshri Choudhury, assisted him in the yoga business. Now, I absolutely loved and I fell in love with Bikram. What I knew it, how I was taught it was taught as being traditional hot yoga. Obviously because the studio that I learned it from and taught at before I became a Bikram teacher said that they couldn't, because they were having legal issues, they couldn't fully say it was Bikram because of the copyright claims, which I totally understand. And I feel like with kind of copyright claims and stuff like that, it's he said that he had copyrighted the 26 postures, and they say in the Netflix documentary he didn't. He was just lying. I actually feel like, now that I'm thinking about it, I want to do a debunking the Netflix documentary, not on the allegations, but just from the things that I've seen. Now, I want to get into it later, but I did not have a healthy teaching experience at Bikram Studios. Actually, none of them, because it's very clear that the toxicity he created kind of streeps through. I'm trying to think of the right words. Kind of like seeps through, and it's embedded in the culture. And if it's embedded in the culture, it's very difficult to get away from. And actually, a lot of yoga studios that I've taught for, particularly with Bikram teachers, particularly Bikram studios, have this hierarchy system, and also have this condescending attitude from the teachers to the student. And I'm going to show you a few clips about it.
You come to my class, you don't know yourself, who you are. I hold a mirror in front of your face. You can see who you are, like X-ray machine, X-ray plate. Who you are, what you are, what is the bad part of you, physically, mentally, spiritually, what is good part of you. That's what you pay for, that's my job. I cannot tell you the lies. No pain, no gain. No money, no honey. So whenever they said easy way, I tell them, go home, eat shit and die. That's Bikram.
They felt sexually violated by you.
Okay. Lie, lie, and lie.
Something that really doesn't sit right with me about yoga in general, the yoga culture. And I've mentioned before, I've gotten so many great positive things from the community, so I don't want to take away from that, but I do want to just talk about how often we have the teacher who's seen as the guru versus the students. And from a perspective of someone who has been a student and who has been a teacher, I feel very uncomfortable with how the Bikram system has become. And even though I love the yoga, in fact, when I record this is the last day of a 30-day Bikram challenge that I've just completed, that I'm about to complete, because I'm going to practice after I finish this. But I feel like the culture has become very tainted. And like I mentioned earlier, I think one of the reasons is that Bikram had an influence on it. His verbose character, his God complex, his need, and this is my opinion of his character, his need to be seen, because, he is of a shorter stature. If you just saw him, he's not a very attractive person. But I'm telling you, I have seen videos of women fawning at him, at his feet, adoring him, absolutely running to him. And part of it could be the power element. He was somebody that loves control. I don't know too much about him recently. I know some people who actually still work for him and speak very highly of him. But his need of control, I feel like, really ultimately ruined the Bikram studios. And I'll give you an example of that, how it was set up. And because I've worked for 2 Bikram studios in Los Angeles, both did not go well at all. In fact, they've been some of the worst working experiences of my life, mainly because of who ran it. And you can tell through them that they learned it from somebody else. So I'll give you an example. I like I said I would. I used to teach for this particular Bikram studio in Los Angeles, and California had just introduced a bill, and I'm not going to run through the bill, so if I don't get it right, please don't crucify me. This is just my quick understanding and paraphrasing of the bill, but basically it was so that independent contractors, because how I understood it was that some companies were trying to get away from fully paying their employees. So in order to kind of nip that in the bud and give people benefits and so forth, it was implemented in a bill that if you worked a certain amount of hours for a company and you didn't have a business, then you were considered an employee. So you had to get employee benefits. Now, to work around that, studios treated us very differently. I heard absolute horror stories from the Bikram, a friend of mine, two friends of mine actually, that worked at the Bikram, that taught at the Bikram studio in Marina Del Rey. I don't know her personally, I just heard personal stories that was going on. So basically, because as most businesses who employ people do, to get away from paying labor fees, to get away from paying payroll tax, they will try to work around it. So she, the owner of the studio that I worked at, that I taught at, she lowered our pay, and I had been teaching there for, I'd say, 2 years at this point. I'm almost certain it was 2 years. It might have been less, but I had been there for a while, and I mean, I'm not promised anything. Of course, duties and work go into a raise too, but I had most attendance. I would say I had about 90% attendance. I hardly ever subbed out my classes. I built a strong community. On the weekends I used to teach, and the possibility of a raise seemed pretty nice, especially because I was making $45 a class, and that included pre-laundry. We had to help with the laundry, had to clean the studio after, so they make it seem like it's just the class, but you end up cleaning too, so it's a cleaner's job too. Not full cleaning, because there were supposed to be cleaners that came in that hardly ever came in, but we did have to do some kind of mat cleaning, some kind of cleaning of the studio. It was expected of us. In fact, she would send us some really nasty text messages if we didn't. So there was a culture of very passive aggressiveness. Back to my story about the pay. She then sent us a mass text message saying that our pay would be decreased and how it would be decreased. So I was supposed to be making, she said, because it was 2 hours that I would be there, well, like 2.5 hours, and I taught at other yoga studios too, so I couldn't max out my hourly there, and it wouldn't be fair. I'm not the kind of person to lie about how long I've been at a place. So instead of our pay going up, our pay went down, and she sent me a text message that I would be paid $17 an hour, and I was livid. I was absolutely livid. It was a very horrible thing to go through, because you expect to get a raise after you put in hard work, effort, time, and you're just rewarded with, not even a thank you for your time, thank you for being around, just your pay is going to go down $17. You're going to start being paid $17 an hour versus $45 a class. So I know if you're listening to this, you're probably like, why did you stay? And honestly, I had wanted to teach so much that I just thought to myself, I'd actually planned on moving to another studio, but I was waiting for that studio to open. That studio actually never opened because they had permit issues, but I had bills to pay. I had responsibilities to meet. So I feel like a lot of these studios, and that's just one example of situations like that. I had a circumstance very similar to that at another Bikram studio. And there was a culture created of the owner knows everything, students, the teachers and students know nothing. And if you debate anything that the owner does, you're out. And I actually saw friends get fired. I saw friends get cut off. It created this very fearful energy. So I wanted to tell you these stories because I feel like although Bikram is to be held accountable, I totally agree with that. I also feel like the studios are to be held accountable because they are still, even though a lot of them don't have the name Bikram on them, they are still perpetuating this very fearful mentality. And a lot of yoga teachers I know that still teach, which are few, it gets fewer and fewer every year because a lot of teachers just can't handle the emotional stress. It's emotional stress that they go through. And like I said, I've been a part of the Bikram community as a whole, teaching, practicing, I would say about 10 years. Even though I got my certification from another studio, knowing Bikram teachers, going to workshops, taking their classes, being a student, being a teacher, for 10 years I've seen this. And a lot of them, the reason why, if you've ever been to a Bikram class and the teacher's angry, the teacher seems like a little irrational, irate, emotionally unstable, I think this is a big reason why. Because who they're learning from, they're learning to be so. They're learning to be irate when they teach, to lose their temper, and it's okay. You know, the amount of Bikram teachers I've seen lose their tempers, I can't even count on my hand. I've seen way more than that. So to me, it's a real problem, and I think that more studios need to be held accountable. And they keep changing their name, and then they say, oh, they're different, you know, but the culture still perpetuates because how it was started is continual, and how it was started can't be changed just overnight. It has to be a process of, to me, enlightenment and realignment with the original foundation of yoga, not with a person, but with yoga, the practice. So as I do more of these, and I'm so excited to be doing these because I feel like we all have a responsibility to be honest, and coming from that community, leaving that community, seeing what has happened, how so many people are left unwell and angry. And I mean, I honestly, looking back, because it's been over a year that I stopped teaching Bikram, and seeing these circumstances, seeing how teachers leave, how there's so much drama, you know, like regular jobs, there isn't that much drama as there is. I've never encountered so much drama, and I used to be in the music industry, so it's just, there's a lot of drama, there's a lot of shifting the blame. And I think when the documentary came out in December 2019, from what I can remember, or it was either November or December, but I think that there has been a shift to blame him. When I personally know teachers and students, owners of the yoga studios, particularly Bikram, that behave like him, but because now the blame has been shifted to him, are not being held accountable. So that leads me to next week when I'm going to break down the Netflix documentary. I'm going to tell you my experience about meeting the creator, and I'm really, really excited. I feel like it's need to be said, you know? And I don't think that the Netflix documentary meant anything harmful. I think that they meant good, but I think it was more for sensationalism, and I'll get more into it. So I hope to see you all next week.